The MCU offers a really interesting case study in story crafting. It is a single creative institution that has chosen a particular narrative formula and then has iterated on that narrative formula over a dozen times. I think you can learn a lot about story crafting by seeing the variance of quality within the MCU projects. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to make a tier list of every MCU script, and I'm going to analyze what they did right and what they did wrong. Hi, my name is Tim, I write for television, and this one's gonna be a doozy. A few things to go over first. I'm going to be ranking these movies on their scripts and their scripts alone. The dialogue and the story and the structure. The acting and filmmaking I do not care about. That's not what we're talking about today. Next, a lot of these movies feature a lot of improv, and I am not going to go through each script with a fine-tooth comb, discovering which line was improv and which line was written. For our purposes today, I'm going to treat every word spoken as being part of the script. Next, to keep this ranking somewhat organized, I will be using a rubric to grade these movies that contains 4 main categories. The protagonist. Every one of these movies is built around a hero who has to do heroic things. A well-written hero will have a lot of unique and dynamic qualities, as well as a lot of agency over the plot. The hero needs to be either really unique or really relatable, ideally both. The antagonist. I'm using this as a shorthand for both the villain and for the conflict. Good conflict challenges the hero in a meaningful, personal way. Good antagonists are charming with interesting worldviews that highlight features of the hero through juxtaposition. My least favorite kind of antagonist is a villain whose only motivation is killing the hero. A superhero should not be fighting to defend themselves, they should be fighting to defend the world. The final battle. An exceedingly common mistake in the MCU is a boring final act, usually because the final conflict doesn't force the hero to sacrifice or face a dilemma, or at least force the hero to be clever or maybe surprise the audience. A bad final battle is one where the superhero wins by simply being a better puncher than the villain. That's not good writing. And finally, the quips. The MCU is famous for excessive quipping, but as I have said previously, not all quips are made the same. Some quips help establish the tone or the character. Other quips undercut the story you're trying to tell. Using those criteria and some other observations, I'll be ranking all of the MCU scripts. Let's begin. Phase 1. To start, we have Iron Man. Let's check the rubric. The protagonist? Great. He's extremely dynamic with lots of foibles and inner conflict. He has tons of agency over the story, one of the strongest in the whole lineup. The antagonist? Obadiah Stane is a pretty boring villain, elevated by some fabulous Jeff Bridges acting. But words on page, he doesn't have much going on. He doesn't really challenge Iron Man in an interesting way. In the end, he's here to fight him, he's here to kill him. That's boring. The final battle? It's a mixed bag. It doesn't challenge Tony on an emotional level, but there's fun science shenanigans, like Iron Man using ice accumulation to his advantage. And that's good. The quips? Perfection. The humor is whip smart and used like a scalpel for the purpose of creating an iconic character. I think this movie does a great job finding the entertainment value in engineering and experimentation. Like how Tony invents his little gadgets and then tests them. The one thing I'm going to dock this script points for is that the movie is extremely unkind to its female characters, often putting them down or pinning them against each other in a way that doesn't really serve the plot and just makes everyone involved seem petty and lame. I'm giving the script a B. Next, we have the Incredible Hulk. The protagonist? Good. For all the flaws this movie has, Banner is not one of them. He's very clearly defined, with a lot of inner conflict, without being a passive sad sack. He's tormented, but in a fun way. The antagonist? He's kind of boring. It's just another Hulk, only he's less interesting than the first Hulk, so nothing to offer here. The final battle? As boring as it gets. Hulk smash, roll credits. The quips? Not bad. I think that this movie is really trying not to be super angsty and depressing despite how tragic the hero is, so it keeps it light with little moments of humor. It works to some degree. The one shining light of this movie is the metaphor. It has something interesting to say about mood disorders. I made a whole video that you can see about this film here. I'm giving this script a C. Next, Iron Man 2. The protagonist? It's the same as Iron Man 1. It's Tony. He's back, and he does some good development here. The antagonist? They made this villain as eccentric as it gets to try to paper over the fact that he is yet another villain whose only motivation is wanting to hurt Tony Stark, and that's not a good conflict for a superhero. The final battle? Utterly forgettable. Try to remember what happens at the end of this movie. You can't. The quips? Somehow bad. Even though it's the same team as the first film, I think the humor in this one is way off base. There's a little bit of Flanderization going on where they turn Tony into a caricature of his earlier self, almost incapable of being serious for even a single scene. Is there anything this movie does well? Coulson is fun, but not much else. I'm giving it a D. Thor. The protagonist? It's fine. It's Thor. It's fine. He has a serviceable arc going from arrogant alpha male to selfless hero. And there's some good fish out of water moments, but all of his relationships in this script are paper thin. The antagonist? Loki is definitely the stronger of the two characters, but once again, he's only really motivated by wanting to hurt Thor and sort of Thor's family in general. And that's not a good motivation for a villain. The final battle is serviceable. There's a fun self-sacrifice moment, and then he has to fight Loki, which includes another sacrifice. It's fine. The quips are pretty good. The humor is mostly mined from the juxtaposition of high fantasy Thor in a normal town.
I need a horse!
Which is good and helps define the character. And that's what we want to see from quips. It gets a C. It's about as average as it gets. Captain America, the First Avenger. The protagonist is insanely well written. Truly a masterstroke. Every single thing that Steve says is dripping with characterization. He has clear motivations, clear flaws, and is exceedingly likable. He is the ideal superhero. Morally infallible without being boring. No notes. The antagonist? Fine. It's just Nazis, but at least they have a worldview. The final battle? Terrific. We have dilemmas, sacrifice, a chance for character development, even a little tragic twist end for the villain. The quips are used sparingly but effectively. The script does basically everything right. I think if the villain were a little more interesting, this would be in the S tier, but for now, this is high A tier. The Avengers. The protagonists are a mixed bag. Cap and Tony are great. We love them. Thor is here, and he's here. Mark Ruffalo's version of Bruce Banner gets introduced in this film, and I think he's mishandled. Banner lacks a lot of defining qualities, and we don't see him ever get control over his Hulk problem, which should be his central arc. The antagonist? Loki's back, and he's still pretty boring, honestly. Conquering the world is at least a better motivation than just wanting to kill the heroes, but only a little bit. The final battle? About as good as it gets. It's dynamic with lots of goals and dilemmas. It's got moments for characterization. Tony gets a sacrifice beat. Cap proves why he's the leader. I love it. Quips? Good. Here, the jokes are used with precision to make Tony as irritating as possible to his teammates, which is central to this movie's conflict. I think it's great that despite Tony delivering 10 jokes a minute, it's Steve who gets the biggest laugh out of me when I watch this movie.
And I'd like to know how Loki used it to turn two of the sharpest men I know into his personal flying monkeys.
Monkeys? Do not understand.
I do. I understood that reference.
This movie set the template for how to do big superhero team-ups, and it really nailed how to do a fascinating, fun final battle. This is a high A tier for sure. So that's phase one. If you look at phase one like a TV show, then you'll see that it does the most important thing a TV show needs to do, which is introduce the characters and get you invested in their story. Let's see how phase two goes. Iron Man 3. The protagonist? It's Tony. He's always good, but here he's the best he's ever been. The movie finds new depths for Tony, using his armor as a metaphor for the walls we put up after experiencing trauma. His flaws, which are normally waved away as boys will be boys, are taken very seriously here. The antagonist? Great. Finally, we have an antagonist who has a relationship with Tony, but whose motivation extends beyond wanting to kill Tony. He has a whole master plan to take power, and Tony is a part of it, but he's not the only part of it. That's good writing. The final battle? It's perfection. We've got lots of dilemmas, we've got the upping of the stakes, we have surprises galore, and we finally give Pepper her moment to take a step into the spotlight and be a hero. The quips? There's nothing revolutionary about having a character use humor to hide inner pain, but it works extremely well here. The fact is, this is a Shane Black script, so obviously it's S tier. Thor: The Dark World. The protagonist is Thor. Thor's back, and he's still boring. He might be even more boring, no longer having the fun character arc of having to prove his worthiness. The antagonist? Here, we have the most boring villain in the entire MCU. Dark Elves. I think they want to destroy the world. Or the universe, maybe? I don't remember. The final battle has some neat moments with portals, but it's another fight that Thor wins because he's Thor, and he Thors harder than anyone. The quips? Considering that this movie is supposed to be the dark Thor movie, the goofy comic relief feels even more irritating than usual. I will say, to this movie's credit, it does have a genuine emotional death scene that does propel Thor and Loki's relationship in an interesting direction, but with very little payoff. This one, D tier. Captain America: Winter Soldier. The protagonist? Cap's back, baby, and he's still a giver. He's got the perfect inner arc, struggling with his role within America's ever-expanding war machine. There's even some good character work for Natasha and Nick Fury. The antagonist? Perfect. One of the better reveals in the MCU. Having the whole institution that once supported the Avengers become the villain is the perfect metaphor for what Steve is going through as a character. The final battle? Ooh, simply divine. Emotionally fraught, with Bucky involved, filled with dilemmas, lots of moments for characterizations, the whole Cap's orders scene. It's everything a final battle should be in a superhero movie. I love it. The quips? Minimal and highly effective. Most of the humor comes from Steve's out-of-time nature, and it really helps put you in Steve's head. The movie makes all the best choices possible. It makes a really interesting point about Steve's relationship within the machine, and also kind of the relationship of these superheroes within the machine of the MCU. It's a perfect script, it's S tier, no doubt. Guardians of the Galaxy. The protagonists? Yeah, man, profane critter, talking tree, Quill is a little irritating at first, but I like how seriously this movie takes his feelings. He's a very well-motivated goofball. The antagonist? Okay, I'm not going to go to bat for Ronan the Accuser, but at least he doesn't take up a lot of screen time. The final battle? Great. We've got sacrifice. We've got upping the ante. We've got surprise dance-off. We've got the power of friendship. It's surprisingly moving and well-earned. The quips? Some of the best in the MCU. This is a movie about a bunch of goofballs teaming up to save the galaxy, and so the humor is extremely important in goofballing them up. It's crazy how many tones they managed to fit in this wacky little movie. It's a true high-wire act when it comes to narrative structure. I think if the conflict was just a little bit more interesting, this would be S tier. As it stands, high A tier, love it. Avengers: Age of Ultron. The protagonist? Well, the gang is back, and honestly, they are more lovable than ever. Lots of good internal dynamics at play, a complicated conflict brewing within the team. Even Banner gets some actual character development for once. The antagonist? I do not love Frankenstein's monster plots when it comes to superheroes. I feel like the whole movie is just cleaning up Tony's mess, and that's not what superheroes are supposed to do. The final battle? Whedon knows how to set the stage for a dynamic final set piece. Lots of civilians to save, a puzzle to solve, a bad guy to beat. Space is given for several personal, emotional moments. This whole movie is built to set up Hawkeye's death, and then it does a little last-minute switcheroo and kills some other guy. It's nice. The quips? Very good. Early on, we see humor deployed to establish the friendly rapport of this team. I think eventually the villain is betrayed by one too many jokes, but it's not a tonal nightmare. I think what drops this movie, in my estimation, even though it does pretty well on the rubric, is that it's just trying to do too much. There's way too many plots just sort of jammed into the middle, and it really wrecks the pacing. So I'm gonna give this a C tier. Ant-Man. The protagonist? It's a mess, guys. Look, Scott is funny and he's likable, but he's the wrong main character. This whole movie is all about Hank and his legacy and his family, so why must Hope be the supporting character to this random burglar? It makes no sense narratively. It feels really weird to watch this woman get sidelined for a guy who has literally nothing to do with the story, so that he can be the hero instead. The antagonist? It's a guy with similar powers who hates the protagonists. It's dumb, moving on. The final battle? It's novel, yes, but it doesn't really have any fun moment that pushes the hero emotionally or causes them to have to think creatively. The quips are irritating, mostly. Honestly, guys, I hate this script. I think it's terrible, and I think the way it treats Hope is a crime, so I'm giving it an F. So there it is, that's phase 2, and it's a bit of a mixed bag, but it has some of the highest highs in the series, a couple stinkers, but it's alright. I think it's doing well by its two main pillars, which is Steve Rogers and Tony Stark. Before we move on, why not hit the subscribe button? Did you know that only 4% of people who watch my videos are subscribed? I think that's low, so clicky click. Okay, moving on. Phase 3. Captain America Civil War. The protagonists? Well, Cap is back, and he's doing what he does best, standing by his principles and leading. I like the way this movie tests its protagonists, seeing how far they will go for what they believe, and these are superheroes, so they should be willing to go all the way. The antagonist? Once again, Cap finds himself at odds with the ruling institutions of the world, just as it should be. And what a gift it is to have Tony as a villain. Finally, those flaws we've learned to accept from Tony become untenable. I think it's great that they let Tony's guilt and empathy and fear take center stage in this film, because this way Tony never slides into full-on supervillain, which is something this franchise will completely forget about when they do Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Also, Zemo is here, and Zemo is not a terrific villain, but he does the job well enough, setting everything in motion. The final battle? I mean, what more do you want? Tony and Cap fight. It's emotional. It's meaningful. There's shield into the core to represent Tony's broken heart. It's good. The quips? A very interesting use case in this film. The first time the Avengers fight, there's plenty of quips, like no one is taking this too seriously, which serves to heighten the drama of the second fight between Tony and Cap, where there are no jokes, no cleverness, just anger and pain. All in all, I think this is a very well-written script, and it mines all the drama from falling out with a friend. I'm not putting it in S tier because I think it has room to grow. I think more could have been done with Zemo, for example, but definitely A tier. It's a good script. Doctor Strange. The protagonist? I don't know. On paper, this should work. Arrogant man of science who discovers the mystic arts and starts to climb the ranks. But I feel like Strange is not specific enough in his cheeky arrogance. He's doing a sort of half-hearted Tony Stark, and that's just not enough to distinguish himself. Add to that, he's not central enough to the main story of the movie.
You're like a child who wanders into the middle of a movie and wants to know...
The antagonist? Snooze fest. Another evil, world-eating god. Boo. The final battle? It's good! We got a fun little twist. No punching to be seen, just good old-fashioned outsmarting. We love that. The quips? Dreadful. Totally out of place. You should check out a video I made about comedy directors to see how this movie specifically completely fails to write jokes. Anyway, D tier, obviously. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. The protagonist? Quill is back, and he's doing more character work than ever. Lots of good emotional growth from him, as well as a fun dynamic with Rocket. Gamora has a lot more to do in this film, expanding on her relationship with her sister. It's all great. The antagonist? One of them is Ego, and he's good. He's got a fun little plan that makes a smart choice of involving Quill without being all about him. And Nebula's back, and she's my favorite person in these movies, and her stuff with her sister is awesome. Final battle? Fun, creative, lots of surprises, even a tragic death, one of the most heartbreaking lines in the entire MCU. The quips? The humor is perfectly in keeping with this movie's tone, and while some of the jokes do tend to drag on a little bit too long, they do effectively serve the characterization. This movie passes our rubric with flying colors, so it's gotta be an S, right? Not so fast. It doesn't show up on the rubric, but this movie has really bad pacing. Its second act is really slow and has lots of scenes of people just sitting around and talking. Second acts is usually where the MCU does their best work, but not here. So I'm giving the script a B. Spider-Man: Homecoming. Protagonist? I'm just gonna say it. This is the best Spider-Man ever written for the screen. He's naive but moral, he's immature but in a realistic way, so many tropes avoided, so many clever surprises, a truly fresh take. And we finally see a new take on the idea of taking responsibility. The antagonist? So fun, so clever. The final reveal is a masterstroke. And I think it's such a smart move to have him be a thief, not a murderer. He's not trying to end the world or kill lots of people. He's just greedy. It keeps the stakes nice and ground level. The final battle? It's not great. This movie has a lot of set pieces, a lot of big moments, and it's a shame that the last one is the weakest. Also, I think it's hard to forget about how bad this final battle looks, but I don't think that's the script's fault, so I'm gonna give it partial credit. The quips? The stakes here are very reasonable, and the tone of this movie is very high school, so all the humor feels totally in line. It really helps that Peter's humor is so good-natured. He's never sarcastic or mean. All in all, I think this is a really, really solid Marvel script. I'm gonna give it A tier. Thor: Ragnarok. Protagonist? Absolutely nails it. Fully resuscitates Thor's character while also upgrading Loki, Hulk, and Odin. It focuses on the family dynamic between the Norse gods, focusing on relatable experiences, like sibling rivalry and struggling with your self-image. Antagonist? Once again, knocks it out of the park. What villain best highlights the themes of family conflict? Long-lost evil sister who brings a new perspective on your father. She's got a little bit of the Disney villain in her, where she's overly extravagant and kind of campy. She makes a really compelling metaphor, sort of an embodiment of your violent past coming back to haunt you. The final battle? One of the best. What's great about this final battle is that Thor wins for the first time by being clever instead of being strong. And it's so much more satisfying to watch Thor outsmart his opponents. Additionally, the ending brings up a lot of great ideas about nationhood and identity. The quips? I really love the way this movie uses humor. It's so malleable, sometimes wielded to highlight the Kafkaesque nature of their imprisonment, other times employed to mask a deep well of grief and regret. Retooling Thor as a big doofus really effectively builds pathos for what was once the MCU's least interesting character. This is one of the best scripts in the MCU. And what I find so fascinating is that underneath all the silly humor, there is a really radical political narrative about coming to terms with the violent history of a colonial empire. And by framing that whole narrative within the context of grieving the death of a father, it makes the story really relatable and personal instead of lofty and idea-based. It's an obvious S tier. It's the reason I made this video, and if you are at all interested in screenwriting, you should analyze this script under a microscope. Black Panther. Protagonist? He's kind of boring. Look, no shade to the late great Chadwick Boseman, but the character of T'Challa is super uninteresting. He's got a lot of stuff on his mind, the responsibility of being a king and all that, but he's got no take, no clear defining qualities. At least in Civil War, he's a single-minded vengeance machine. Here, he's a blank space where a protagonist should go. The antagonist, on the other hand, is awesome. Killmonger is one of the best villains in the MCU. He challenges the hero in a really interesting way. He upends the whole status quo of Wakanda. My only complaint is that after taking the throne, I feel like he loses a lot of his sympathetic edge and becomes more of a typical evil guy who does evil stuff. The final battle? Absolutely dreadful. It's amazing to me that this movie was given a pass for one of the least inspired climaxes in MCU history. This interesting ideological battle between T'Challa and Killmonger is resolved through a bland CGI knife fight. The civil war between these Wakandan characters amounts to nothing at all. I mean, here we have these two lovers who are on opposite sides of the battle. It should be a moment dripping with tragedy and drama, and instead it is completely deflated by a Disney movie level animal gag and never spoken about again. The quips are mostly bad. Trying to make T'Challa have funny bits serves only to muddle his characterization. Several big dramatic moments are totally undercut by jokes that feel like this film is trying to meet a quip quota. It's a mess. Before I put this movie in my tier list, I want to remind you, I am grading only the script. The acting, the cinematography, the score, all that stuff that is fantastic in Black Panther, I'm not thinking about. I'm just thinking about the narrative structure and the dialogue. And on that front, it's not great. I will give it some points for some very interesting world building and some fun political intrigue, but it's a C for sure. Avengers: Infinity War. This movie makes a really interesting choice with its protagonists. One of the more interesting choices in the whole MCU. It decides to focus on these characters' flaws, and instead of having these heroes overcome the flaws to win in the end, this is a tragedy. Their flaws are their undoing. It is a remarkable thing to do in a superhero narrative. They lose not because the villain was strong, but because the heroes were weak. They were too angry, too moral, too scared, or simply too inaccurate. The antagonist? Well, once again, this film makes the rare choice of giving the villain a true arc. He goes on a journey. He experiences trials and tribulations. He makes sacrifices. He is changed by the story. He is, in some ways, the protagonist of the movie. The final battle? I mean, it's pretty good. Lots of meaningful moments, dilemmas, character deaths. It would be just okay if it weren't for the fact that the bad guy wins, which is such an excellent story choice. When it comes to the quips, this movie has a very hard task. It needs to combine a bunch of movies with very different tones. And I think for the most part, it succeeds. It helps that it focuses on all the funniest characters like the Guardians, Thor, and Iron Man, but I want to point out that, once again, the funniest joke in this movie is delivered with a completely straight face by Steve Rogers.
I am Groot!
I am Steve Rogers.
Truly, the GOAT. Anyway, I'm going to put this script in the A tier. Even though I think this script makes some of the most interesting and bold choices in the entire MCU, it's also just a little bit messy and unfocused. Ant-Man and the Wasp. Starting with the protagonist, I ragged on Ant-Man for how that script totally shafted the one woman in the story, so I have to give this movie praise for finally making Hope the protagonist. One movie late, but what can you do? And Scott gets some great character work as well, allowing him to play second fiddle, which if anything makes him more likable. The antagonist? I love the idea of a villain who's trying to cure someone, but I think having the villain be a twist reveal in the final act means we don't get the time to properly establish his motivations, and so he feels underbaked. The final battle? Lots of fun bits, a bunch of funny payoffs to long gestating setups. I think it's hampered again by the underbaked villain, but everything else is working just great. The quips? The stakes are in just the right place for the majority of this movie that the jokes never feel out of place tonally. And the movie very smartly tailors the comedy for each character. Hope is the straight man. Scott is the silly sidekick. It works. Ant-Man and the Wasp is a really solid script that fixes almost all of my complaints with the first Ant-Man. I'm giving it a B and points for most improved. Captain Marvel. The protagonist might be the worst written in the whole MCU. Truly, try this out. Pick any hero in the MCU and think of an emotion or personality trait that defines them. Captain America, hope. Hulk, anger. Iron Man, arrogance. Even some of the side characters. Black Widow, duplicity. Scarlet Witch, grief. Hawkeye, dadliness. Now think about Captain Marvel. What is her core trait? This is the thing about emotionless amnesiac soldiers, they don't make good protagonists. The antagonist? Well, see, the thing about having a blank slate protagonist is that the antagonist has no hero to clash ideologies with. There are no traits that he serves to bring out in the hero. It is almost impossible to make him interesting. So this movie doesn't even try. The final battle? She becomes invincible, punches everyone, and wins. So that sucks. The quips? This movie takes something iconic, like Nick Fury's eye patch, and makes it the punchline of an extremely stupid joke. This movie should be sued for malpractice, it's bad, it gets an F. See me after class. Avengers Endgame. Protagonist? Surveying the scene, it looks pretty good. Tony gets a family, Natasha gets to finally step into the spotlight, Steve finds new ways to be a hero, Thor is despondent. Everything looks... Hang on, is that Hulk? Why is he like that? Why have you removed the only conflict this character has ever had? Why did you do this? The antagonist? Thanos is back and now he's less interesting. The final battle? We've got dilemmas, we've got emotional conflict, we've got surprising character beats from Captain America, we've got a sacrifice, it's doing everything right. Full marks for... Oh no. Don't do that. Guys, why are you doing this to me? Oh god, the cringe. It hurts so much, the empty attempts at feminism. Women in space. Oh. The quips? Fine. Smartly, this movie leaves the comedy bits to the comedy characters. I never love guy gets fat jokes, but I will say, this one works because he keeps the weight on for the final battle. And even with his extra weight, he's still, a god, so being fat isn't really a problem. Also, side note, I think Fat Thor is sexy. Avengers Endgame is obviously a trip down memory lane for the MCU, and it does that very well. It sets the characters against their earlier selves so you can see how far they've come. It concludes a decade-long arc for Tony and Steve, with each character moving in opposite direction. Tony goes from selfish to selfless, Steve goes from putting everyone else first to finally doing something for himself. It's a beautiful narrative symmetry, and it ends the movie in a really nice way. It's a shame the rest of the movie is such a mess. It's better than Ultron, going in B tier. Spider-Man Far From Home. Protagonist? Spider-Man is back, and he's regressed, honestly. The fact that his arc centers on him losing one of his powers is a total misstep because he doesn't really do anything to solve it. He just gets it back in the end. It's a swing and a miss. The antagonist? I like the idea. I like that he has a relationship with the hero. I like that he has a different perspective on Tony. But I think that the MacGuffin of this story is just very hard to get past. Why on earth did Tony leave a drone army to a teenager? The final battle? Bad. Spider-Man shows up and he's good at punching, and so he punches until he wins. There's no twist, there's no dilemma, there's no sacrifice. The quips? Good. High school setting keeps the jokes feeling earned. This is a film that I think has lost a lot of goodwill upon rewatch. It still has a lot of the narrative sensibilities that the first one had, so it's not terrible, but the structure is just an absolute mess, so I'm giving it a C. So that's phase 3, and it's looking still pretty solid. A lot of great high points, a couple stumbles here and there, but this phase is really good. So let's move on to phase 4. I'm sure it won't hurt me. Black Widow. The protagonist? Good stuff here. Natasha and her family and their whole dynamic. Yelena is introduced, love her. But not a lot is done with these heroes. I mean, look at Red Guardian. He's a guy who spends the whole movie going, man, I wish I'd been able to fight Captain America. And then in the end, he is pitted against a villain who can mimic anyone's powers. This should be a great moment where a Taskmaster uses her powers to assume Steve Rogers' powers, and then the Red Guardian is very happy to finally get to fight Captain America. The fact that they don't do this is very emblematic of this whole movie. Setup with no payoff. The antagonist? It makes sense that Natasha has to go up against the assassin organization that made her. I just wish they weren't so boring. The final battle? Lots of missed opportunities for payoffs, a nonsensical solution to the mind control problem, a sacrifice that is immediately undercut. Really, nothing works here. The quips? Yelena is genuinely funny in the way a bratty little sister is. Red Guardian is genuinely funny in the way only your uncool dad is. It works. The fact that this movie does so well by its characters means I don't really want to give it anything less than a C, but I will say the fact that this came out after Nat's death is just pants on head stupid. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. The protagonist? Not great. I get what they were going for, an everyman vibe, but the fact that every other character in this movie is more interesting than him just goes to show how bad they whiffed. The antagonist? Pretty good. The script takes the time to flesh him out, to build pathos, to make him relatable to people who have complicated relationships with their dad. Also, starting out with a love story is a very strong way to build sympathy with a villain. Final battle? It's a big, boring punch-a-thon. I'll give it points that there's a little bit of emotional weight to Shang-Chi fighting his dad, but nothing else wins me over here. The quips? Actually pretty good. I think it's interesting that Katie seems like the comic relief, but then she winds up taking this all very seriously, which I think is more relatable and endearing. Meanwhile, Trevor Slattery is the actual comic relief, which works great because he provides a bunch of laughs and then gracefully slips into the background, so as not to distract from this movie's more tragic tone in the end. I think this movie does a pretty good job setting up a new superhero and then navigates a pretty complicated plot with a lot of grace. I only wish that the hero they were setting up was more interesting. C tier. Eternals. Protagonist? I'm so mixed on this one. They are interesting. They have varying worldviews, lots of internal conflict, and juicy, dramatic emotional relationships. From lover to mentor to sibling to enemy, they each stake out positions on many different overlapping moral and political issues. But there are so damn many of them, and we spend 2 hours just meeting them all. Additionally, I think this script genuinely loses track of the character motivations in some scenes. Like, here we have the main characters trying to convince this inventor guy to help them save the world. The inventor is the only Eternal who has made a family with humans. He should be the only guy who takes no convincing. He should be an immediate yes, and yet they spend a whole scene debating and deliberating, and I just cannot fathom how you write a scene this bad. The antagonist? Such a mess. First, you have the friend-turned-enemy twist-ending bad guy, and he's betrayed by the fact that it's a twist-ending bad guy. He's been lying for the first 2/3 of the movie, so we don't really have any time spent learning about who he really is. And then, there's a weird, evolving monster bad guy who is insanely underbaked, and I genuinely don't know what he's doing in this movie. Final battle? Fine. Some twists, some betrayals, a cool dilemma. I think that these characters are all a little too subdued, so it lacks the big emotional outbursts of, say, Tony and Steve fighting. But it's okay. The quips? Oh man, do these suck. This is exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about humor undercutting the characters. These somber immortals dealing with grief and mental illness pitted against each other, debating abortion and genocide, should not be making little jokes all the time. As much as I like the filmmaking in this film, the script is just the pits. And it's amazing to me that they didn't make this into a TV show, which is where it really would have worked to meander around and meet all these immortals and have a lot of lofty discussions about the price of life and the meaning of their existence. But they didn't do that, so it's D tier. Spider-Man: No Way Home. We start with the protagonist, and I think this movie is really interesting in that it rests the entire story on Peter's morality. And I think that's cool. Antagonist? A story of a hero trying to actually save a gallery of villains is very interesting and presents a fascinating conflict. It's maybe too many villains, but beyond that, it's okay. The final battle, again, it's neat. He's trying to save the villains, not just fight them, but the fight itself is unremarkable. I hate that they do the fake out death moment. I also think the final magic spell part of the movie feels really jammed in. The quips, one thing these Spider-Man movies tend to do right is the comedy. It comes very naturally from the characters. My only complaint is that this movie brings in Doctor Strange, and his comedy beats don't work at all for me. On top of that, his whole reason for being in this movie is just not thought through. I feel like the quippy nature comes into a little conflict with this movie's much more tragic tone, so it's gonna get a C. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. The protagonist? The whole franchise just doesn't know what to do with Strange. His arc in this movie is such a nothing burger. Antagonist? Dreadful. This movie completely demolishes Wanda's character to turn her into a bad guy. Think back to Civil War and how they managed to keep Tony relatable while also in conflict with Steve. Here, Wanda becomes an unhinged psychopath, willing to do mass murder for the opportunity to steal someone else's children. It's a horrible waste of a character. The final battle? This one really sucks. It actually ends with a "the power was inside you all along" beat, which is just dreadful. And then having Wanda decide to remove herself from the film makes the whole story feel pointless. The quips? Once again, this movie doesn't really know what to do with Doctor Strange. Is he a snarky guy who doesn't take anything seriously, or is he a wizened fatherly figure? It makes the humor very hit or miss. This movie is such a mess, man, and it's not like they couldn't have written a good conflict between Wanda and Strange that wouldn't have completely assassinated her character. So I'm gonna give this one a D. Thor: Love and Thunder. Protagonist? This movie is very interesting because it does everything almost right. It brings back Jane, smartly gives her an arc that doesn't revolve around Thor. Thor himself gets a new arc, once again revolving around family. It's all very solid, very well executed, but also disconnected. Like, a story that revolves around Thor's love interest dying spends a whole lot of time doing other things, so the tragic death of a loved one gets pushed into the background. All the themes you want from a story about facing death are just kind of lost in the shuffle. Antagonist? Once again, I can see how it could work. Angry, grieving father decides to kill all the gods. We've established a bunch of gods in this universe. Surely there will be a heartbreaking scene of him slaying, say, Aetiri, the Forge Master, played by Peter Dinklage. That would really set the stage. No? Why not? Why are you like this? The final battle? Cool stuff. I like them giving kids Thor's power for the final scene. It's got the right emotional heft, there's a sacrifice, Thor gets to solve a problem with his head instead of his arm. As long as the script remembers to set up the idea that Thor can give other people powers. What's that? It doesn't? Why? Why are you like this? Quips? It's weird. Taika's last Thor movie, Ragnarok, is one of the funnier MCU scripts. Taika is a master of comedy, and yet this Thor movie makes the age-old mistake of constantly undercutting the characters with out-of-place jokes. A story about grief and rage should be focusing on gallows humor, or humor to deflect pain, something that Ragnarok did really well. But here we get screaming goats. Also, Jane gets a bunch of silly quips, which is not at all in her character. I think this film would have been a lot better if Jane were deadly serious all the time, and you let the humor arise from her interactions with Thor. I think this movie looks so bad because it follows Ragnarok, but honestly, if you comb through it, you'll find that a lot of the pieces to the script just don't fit together. I'll give it a C because at least it has an interesting villain and some well-explored themes. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. So the protagonist for this movie is a bit of an issue, huh? I mean, who's gonna replace T'Challa? Will it be the effortlessly charming, battle-tested M'Baku, who has a fun, love-hate relationship with T'Challa's ruling family? Or will it be the boring little sister Shuri? Oh, it's the little sister, huh? Well, hopefully this quippy, headstrong young inventor will team up with someone who contrasts with her. Oh, no, it's another quippy, young, headstrong inventor. What are we doing here, people? Antagonist. How do you top Killmonger? Surely not like this. Final battle. I almost want to go back and apologize for what I said about Black Panther's boring final battle after seeing Wakanda Forever's even more boring, cluttered mess of a finale. Quips. You can actually feel this movie rejecting Shuri like a transplanted organ. She is supposed to be the quippy side character, and now she's the angry, brooding lead. So now she's boring and brooding, and also sometimes says a little joke that feels totally out of place. I want to reserve my F-tier movies for the movies that really deserve it, but I'm giving this one a D-. If Phase 3 was a triumphant house party, Phase 4 is the hangover that comes after. Nothing here works, and what's worse, franchises that used to work are now misfiring. Let's see if Phase 5 can right the ship. Ant-Man Quantumania. The protagonist? The Lang and Van Dyne family go on a magical adventure, and sadly, this film makes the mistake of the first Ant-Man script by focusing too much on Scott. He's such an excellent sidekick, and he's a very poor lead. Antagonist? He's fine. It's an interesting character who poses a real humdinger of a threat. I don't really see why he's paired with Ant-Man. He doesn't contrast in an interesting way. The final battle? It's pretty bad. It makes the repeated mistake of having the protagonist look like they're about to lose, and then a random side character shows up and saves the hero. There are also several character deaths that are trying to pull at the heartstrings, but only invoke the mildest of shrugs. The quips? The thing that makes Sidekick Scott so fun is that he doesn't really have a dog in the race, so he can layer in all these funny jokes. But when his daughter's life is in mortal danger, you either get out-of-place jokes or just deadly serious Scott, which is like using a pair of very sharp scissors to put together an IKEA bed. It's the wrong tool for the job. Man, this one makes me feel bad. Like, kind of with Thor in the same boat, you hate to see a franchise improve and then regress. I'm gonna give this script a D, and that's not even mentioning how ugly the final product is. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. The protagonist? Well, look who's back. It's Quill and Gamora and Nebula and Rocket. Good protagonists with well-written character arcs. I particularly love how Gamora gets to take back some agency and make a new life for herself, rejecting the life that everyone else thinks she's supposed to have. Also, Nebula continues to be the unsung hero of the MCU. Making Rocket the protagonist is a great idea. Rocket is a character who is lovable, but also has a lot of room to grow. Everything just works. The antagonist, on the other hand, is boring for the most part, but his relationship with Rocket is cool. Gunn really likes the themes of messy, broken people versus the authoritarians who try to fix them. The final battle? It's okay. I think there's some missed opportunities, like having Rocket lead a small animal rebellion. And I think the finale goes on just a little too long, but these are nitpicks, it's fine. The quips? Good. The nice thing about these characters is that having the plot come to a screeching halt because Nebula can't open a car door is totally within audience expectations. You never feel like the characters aren't taking the situation seriously, you just feel like these people are unable to not be ridiculous, even when their lives literally depend on it. I think that Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is the weakest of the Guardians movies. I think maybe James Gunn got a little in his head about his legacy at Marvel as he closed this page on his creative journey. But I don't think I could give it anything lower than a B. Please bring back Nebula. She's the best character in this franchise. The Marvels. Look, I can't do it. I can't break this movie down using the rubric because nothing here works. I mean, top to bottom, a complete and utter failure. Might be the worst time I've ever had watching a Marvel movie. There is not one single scene in this movie that has anything even approaching good writing. Pairing the maddeningly boring Captain Marvel with the cloying Kamala and also some other woman who has no defining qualities is like eating a pizza made of Cheez Whiz, ketchup, and drywall. It only looks appetizing at a distance. F. Next is Deadpool and Wolverine. I'm not sure if I want to include this. Like, it's technically an MCU movie in that it's a movie they made after acquiring Fox, but it's not really set in the MCU universe unless you want to count the multiverse. But then, by that logic, just all pieces of fiction technically exist within the multiverse of the MCU. The thing about this movie is that it feels so meta and so detached from reality that it doesn't really feel like a story at all. It feels more like a practical joke made from the pieces of MCU canon. I guess let's just look at the rubric anyway, just to say we did. Protagonist? The tone is so anarchic that it's hard to muster any real investment in these characters. Wolverine is coasting on the pathos he built in other movies. The movie's more serious character beats are undercut by the strangely untethered nature of the story. The antagonist would be cool if she were in a story with Charles Xavier. The effect is rad, but I'm not seeing a cohesive picture here. She doesn't really bring out anything interesting in Deadpool or Wolverine, which is what an antagonist is supposed to do. The final battle? By the time I saw 100 Deadpools getting cut up by Wolverine, I honestly lost track of why anyone was doing anything in this film. The quips? I think jokes ate most of this script, so D tier. Moving on. Captain America: Brave New World. Protagonist? I think Sam Wilson fills an important niche in the MCU. He's got a very charming, everyman appeal. I like how he has no time for all these wizards and aliens. But to be Captain America, you need to be more than just a charming superhero. You need to be, essentially, the world's greatest leader. And this script does not provide Sam that opportunity. Antagonist? So the villain of this movie is supposed to be the smartest man in the world who can predict everything that's going to happen, and he's had years to perfect his villainous plan. At one point, the villain makes a comment that he has a hard time predicting Sam. This should be a great moment where the script highlights something specific about Sam's character that makes him so unpredictable. But they don't. They never explain why this brilliant super genius never planned for Captain America to do superhero stuff. It's a wasted opportunity. The final battle? Can I just say how messed up it is that this movie is chock-a-block full of Hulk characters like Thunderbolt Ross and Betty and the guy with the big brain, and yet there's no Banner. And this final battle, this is the exact moment that they really should have brought in Banner. Not Hulk, Banner, to come in and forgive Ross for what he'd done, to give Ross the absolution he so desperately desires. That would have been a good final beat. Instead, it just ends with Sam talking the Red Hulk down. There's no clever trick or heightened emotional stakes, just, hey bro, calm down. It's such a wet fart of an ending. The quips? The quips are about as bad as it gets in this one. Tons of bathos moments where the character will interrupt their own heroic beat to make a little self-aware comment. It is a testimony to how naturally charming and funny Anthony Mackie is that any of these jokes land at all. I think this movie might have some of the worst expositional dialogue I've seen in any of these scripts. The first 20 minutes of the movie is everyone just stating their backstories like they're at a job interview. I get that this movie is picking up on a lot of threads from the show Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but it does it in the most inelegant way possible. And worst of all, I don't really feel like this movie has anything interesting to say. So, D tier. Thunderbolts. Protagonist? Pretty good. Yelena and Red Guardian were the best parts of the Black Widow movie, and here they are given the space to really shine. Yelena's struggle with depression is extremely relatable. The movie even manages to find sympathy for John Walker. The story feels like a James Gunn script in that it focuses on the escapades of a bunch of lovable psychos and ends with a heartwarming beat about the power of love and friendship. But it is a lot more focused and pared down, which I like. The antagonist? Sentry is one of the more compelling Marvel comic book characters, in my opinion. I think they do everything right here. He's sympathetic, he's lovable, he's scary. Having been very close to someone who had borderline personality disorder, I found his struggles with mental health to be all too familiar. This movie has a dual antagonist, and I think DeFontaine is definitely the less interesting one, but I think she serves her purpose well, which is giving the heroes a challenge that you need to solve politically as opposed to violently. The final battle? Excellent. Setting up a big New York Destructathon and then making a hard left turn into being John Malkovich makes such a fresh new conclusion. It gives the heroes an opportunity to save lives with their strength, as well as with their love and empathy. It's great. The quips? I love that the humor in this movie comes directly from the particular idiosyncrasies of the characters. John Walker is especially funny because he's so specific. He's not just a buffoon. He's the kind of guy who will sometimes be totally right. and then he will remind you about the time he was right for the next 2 weeks. It's very irritating and very funny. The more I turn over the pieces of this story, the more I like it. I think the movie struggles a little bit with pacing early on, but I really love the way that it puts its characters front and center, and then it lets the drama and humor really emerge naturally from them. It gets an A. Fantastic Four First Steps. I already made a video about this movie, but let's do the rubric. The protagonists, pretty good. I think that Reed and Sue work especially well. I really like the part where Sue shouts "killer" to Johnny. My main complaint is that they focus so much on the internal conflict that the movie basically forgets about the external conflict for a huge portion of the story. The antagonist, pretty boring. You got Silver Surfer, who has a lot of story but no real recognizable character traits. Galactus is a fun villain who makes a fun proposition, but the movie is not interested in finding the dramatic potential of his Sophie's Choice, so he feels wasted. The final battle? This ain't it. It's one of those battles that is solved by one character being simply stronger than the other. All the fun plans don't matter. Sue is stronger, so she wins. There is technically a sacrifice involved, but it is negated in a way that is so narratively sloppy, I nearly threw my shoe at the screen. As for quips, this film doesn't actually have any jokes. They have moments that look like jokes, characters banter in a jocular manner, but no humor is generated. So yeah, I'm gonna give this one a D. So that's it. We've graded all the Marvel films, and what have we learned? Well, Phase 1 was scrappy, Phase 2 and 3 were filled with bangers, Phase 4 and 5 were mostly crap, with the occasional silver lining. What I find so useful about the rubric is that you can see how little the MCU has learned from their mistakes. People like to rag on Joss Whedon for his quippiness, but you can see how the jokes have gotten worse and more out of place since he left the building. The bloated third-act CGI battles that we made fun of in 2010 are still here in 2025. Imagine watching The Incredible Hulk and then going into a coma, and then waking up and watching Captain America: Brave New World. You would be astounded by how little this franchise has improved. Despite all this, I don't think the MCU is doomed. It really feels like they are often starting from scratch every time they make a new movie, which means any of their outings could be good, could be bad. Look at the Ant-Man franchise, which oscillates wildly in quality despite the same creative team working on each one. Thunderbolts felt like the first time in a while that we saw that fun, bantery group energy that made the Avengers films work, and I think if the MCU can manage to capture that lightning in a bottle, then at least one of the legs of this mega franchise will still carry weight. So that's my take. If you disagree, get in the comments, let me know, or if you just want to say hi, you can do that too. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.